For my next transition, we're going to do a match cut. Now a match cut matches the motion of an object, burying the cut, so to speak. So within the motion, you have this transition. I'll show you what I mean. What I'm going to do here, I'm just going to copy my first hard cut layers, copy and paste them. I'm going to move them to the top here. So I'm going to find them here and move them over to my start point. Now, I don't need to see all of the layers underneath here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select them. And I'm going to press this little shy button here. Now that will actually allow me to turn them on and off, visibility, not actually turn them on and off. So it'll allow me to like hide them and bring them out. They'll still work. You can see it still works here, but I only see the ones that I want to see, which is a really nice way to look at your session, especially now that the layers are starting to build up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make all of them last for this full range. Shift select and option bracket out. So now they all last that long. I think that's 3 seconds. So actually let's make it a little bit more. I'll just do, let's do option out there. So now I've got like a 5 second, right? And I'll go to the end point here, beginning, and I'll do the same thing for the end point. So now they're just overlapping. So it's just a shortcut. You could do it with your arrow too, but this is just a few shortcuts. And I'll make these a different color too. Why not? Let's make it a sandstone. Now what I'm going to do, with this part of the exercise, I'm going to make them slightly different sizes, just to give them a little bit of difference here. So I'm going to go to scale. Okay. So now that they're slightly different sizes, it doesn't really matter what sizes you make them, just make them different sizes. Now I'm going to put my motion path in. So I'm going to draw my motion path in first on all the layers and then cut it down to the cuts. So I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to hit P for position. I'll make a keyframe there. That is the center position. So I'm going to take that center position and just move it in. Make another keyframe and start my animation off screen. All right, so there's the first position, right? Then I'm going to move it to a second position for another transition, right? So let's go over to here, say. And you can see now I've got a motion path outlined here. And I can edit that path. And then let's make a third position. Say over here. All right, so now within that motion path, I can select these points, right? And see I have a Bezier handle. I can actually change that. By default, it's going to be smooth and a Bezier, but I can actually make those rigid, right? So now that it kind of hits those points, right? So it kind of does one of these, right? Now if I preview this, this is going to look kind of a little lame, right? So what I'm going to do here is put some stops into this, right? And I'm going to adjust these as well too. So let's spread these out here by selecting them all and then option, clicking and holding so I can just drag them out. So now I've got the whole sort of 5 second range here to work with. Let's add some stops in there. Okay, so, and we'll make our motion a little quicker. What I mean by that is I'm going to zoom in here and just look at my positions. So, let's take these keyframes and move them in so that my animate in is really nice and quick, right? Now, I'm going to make these stop keyframes. So I'm going to control click on them, go to toggle hold keyframe this time. So now what happens is it comes in and holds, right? I get a little bit of a hold, which is nice, right? Now, by default, what happens here is then it just jumps to the next one, right? So I have to actually hit another keyframe after my hold to start the motion again. So I'm going to hit another keyframe. Now by default, it's a stop keyframe. So I'm going to go click on, control click on it, and go to keyframe interpolation. and make those Bezier. Let's take a look. Good. So now I've got that second position, right? So let's take this. And again, quicker action, longer pause, right? So let's just do this little action here. I'll make these hold keyframes as well. So now I'll have this kind of thing. All right? Now it's not moving very far, so maybe we just kind of move it even tighter. Right? Then we have a pause. Definitely have to move this in a little bit. We'll make another keyframe to start the action again and make this one again. Keyframe interpolation. Make this one a Bezier. So now there's that action. Get this, and then I'm going to do one more. Keyframe that. Down to the bottom. So this one now has to, this one has to be a stop keyframe. And then there's my final action. I'm going to make sure all of the keyframes are Bezier, right? Just so that there's a softer motion to all of this. Now these stop keyframes are useful in that they give you a solid hold, right, between your actions. So I get that. I've got movement around the frame, in the frame and around the frame. Now this is what I'm actually going to animate. When these shapes start moving is when I'm going to cut in. Hence, burying the cut in the action. I'll show you what I mean. So now we'll take our select tool off all the layers because we're going to just start with our circle. So select the other two layers, Option, bracket, in. So now, circle comes in, pauses, and it turns into, as it's moving, it turns into the triangle, or rectangle, my bad. So now we'll take this one and draw it back. So now let's see what this looks like. Comes in, just scrubbing over, okay. I'm going to take this one off. So Option, bracket out. I'm actually going to Command, see how they're overlapping here? I'm just going to Command backwards arrow. Just make sure that that is off there. Option, bracket out. So now we should get no black space. Good. So that should be flush with each other. Okay, so there's the transition. So it transitions right in the middle of that action, right? So again, we're going to do the same thing here. Go to In, Command, arrow back one, frame, Option, bracket out. So now we get that. So that's quite a nice cut there too, right? It kind of gives it, as it's moving, it changes. So your eye is kind of following the motion and you're not thinking about the cut. So whereas the hard cut is a very obvious cut, the dissolve little less obvious. The wipe is obvious, but you're following motion. This time you're really following just a single object, and it's burying the cut as you follow the motion. So it's a much more seamless cut. Let's preview our action and see if we like it. And for the final exit effect here, I'm going to go to this point, and I'm just going to take it off screen. Now, to fine-tune this, you can see that this actually doesn't pick, it maybe transitions a little too fast, so maybe it should take place kind of more like 2/3 into the action. Let's zoom in a little bit. I'm actually going to extend this to here. So now let's see what that looks like. Maybe a little better. Let's see. Yeah, so it picks up a little speed. So just that subtle frame difference makes a big difference in terms of how you read the object. Good. And that is the match cut. All right, I'm going to advance a little further here. And the next one I'm going to do, I'm going to unshy my layers. I'm going to hit shy on these ones too, so I can just see what I want to see. But I am going to copy and paste my hard cut again. And I'm going to drag it to the very top. And then move them over here. Good. Then unshy these, and then shy the rest of them. So now I'm just dealing with those layers. See, they still work, but you don't have to look at them and sort through them. A little easier to look at your session this way. Okay, so I just want to make sure one thing though before I start is make sure that don't have too much of a gap between these ones. So there's my out frame at 1506. So maybe at 16, I'll start my next transition. So this one goes out, and these three can come in. Just fine-tune this a little bit. All right. Okay. So now I'm going to do something with morph. We've morphed shapes a little bit in the last exercise, and now I want to extend that a little further. And as you see, what we're going to do is we're going to morph from one to the next. So to do that, we're not just going to use the path point here as it looks now. What we're going to do is actually take the path point and break it a little bit. So I'll show you what I mean. Now we're going to make this a custom shape. So here's what I mean. I'm going to control click on the ellipse path, and I'm going to convert it to a Bezier path. What does that mean? Well, now it means that I just get a single path line. And what I'm going to do here is rename this morph. And all of this is going to be my morph path. So I'll show you what I mean. Let's just take and hide these. I'll go to the out point here, and I'm going to option bracket out. So within here, this shape now can be altered. Now, before, you could only alter the size of a circle, right, the diameter, and everything was locked, right? Now, what you get is a shape that you can actually add points to. You can do all sorts of funny things to this shape, whereas before, you couldn't do that, right? Let's center it again. So I'm going to copy all the information from the other two layers onto this path line. Show what I mean. I'm going to go here, contents, rectangle. So this rectangle path, see, I can't really do much with the path. I can't create a custom path out of this. If I try to create a custom point for it, for example, it doesn't, it creates a new shape, right? So I don't want to do that. So I'm going to take the text of the rectangle path here, control click again, and go convert to Bezier path. Now that Bezier path, right, has some information on it. So I'm going to copy that information. I'm going to copy this keyframe, then scroll down here into my path line, and I'm going to paste it onto here. Make sure you have the path selected and you paste it. So let me just show you what that looks like. I'll take the visibility off these two so we can just get a sense of what's happening here. So look, now the circle suddenly turns into a square. Magic, right? A nice smooth morph, right? And we can add some nuance to that animation, but that's the general idea, is that now you have a path that you can actually create this custom morph for. All right, we'll do the same thing with the last one. I just want to see it. And I'm going to go to the Polystar path, click on that text of the Polystar path, control click, and convert to Bezier path. Make one keyframe on there, Command C, copy it, go back down here to this line, make sure the path line's selected, and I'll press Command V. So now on this single layer I have all three shapes. So you guessed it, I don't need triangle and I don't need rectangle. All I need is the morph. So now I get this, right? Now, because I'm going now I'm going to have to alter this a little bit because it kind of jumps in the frame, but I get a general path. You also notice that the colors have changed too, but again, you can always change that in the fill here, so if you want to. So let's do this. Let's take this and go to the beginning. It's at 16, so let's make this a 4-second experience, and I'll click Option, bracket out. So now let's spread these out a little bit here. Option, holding down Option with them all selected, I'll just stretch it out to there, say. And again, I want to add some holds here. Add a hold keyframe, so I'll just copy that keyframe and paste it. So it's the circle. And I'll just add a hold here. So the hold will be, so I'll swap them out. So that'll be at the start. This here will begin our transition. So let's do a second. So a second hold. Then a 10 frame transition. And I'll make that a hold. We'll take that one, copy it along that second line. So that'd be 1810. And I'll make this one make that linear for now. And then I get my quick transition. So let's go to 20. All right, and then I'll go back. Let's make this a loop so that it actually transitions back into the circle. So I'll hit that one. Make it a hold. So at 1920, I hit this keyframe. Make this a linear keyframe. And to the 20 mark, let's make this circle. So we'll hit this circle again. So that's the circle there, right? That keyframe, I'll just copy and paste it there. All right, now let's deal with this, this jumping motion here right now. So let's just make sure that the anchor point is in the center of the layer content, control clicking, and that my shape here is aligned. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is just manually go through my position line here of the layer. And I'm going to press U so I can see my keyframes, and just manually, every keyframe, make sure that it's centered. So I'm just going to kind of drop there, so maybe I'll just put it up a little bit. So now we'll just scrub through there. That looks pretty good, right? So that transition looks pretty good. Now this is where it gets really wild when the third point comes in. let's just manage that transition. So yeah, you can see it jumps up there, right? So at this point, I'll just use my arrow keys to jump forward. I'm going to just try to center this down there. It's kind of jumping. That looks pretty good. So you're only making keyframes, right? You're making keyframes over top of the morph, but you're making sure that you're right over top of those keyframes so that as it's transitioning, it's also changing its position. Then the last one drops off, right? So let's make sure that doesn't happen. So let's jump back, make another keyframe on position, and go to the end here and center that. So now, it's pretty good. Let's play it out. Pretty good. Now, if you want to add color, you can do that if you want. You can go down into the fill colors, right? And you can add, I'll go to the in point, I'll add a color. Keyframe, I'll press U on my keyboard so I just see those colors. And you can see you get a little color bar here, right? So, I'm green at the start, maybe here I'm still green, but then there I turn another color, purple say, right? And then I repeat my keyframe, right? My next transition, maybe I turn yellow, right? And then yellow back to my green, right? So to find the green, what I'm going to do is actually go back here, double click here, and copy the numbers. So copy and paste that number here. And I'm just going to do it exactly so I get the same transition color. So next keyframe, click on a keyframe, and then click on my color box and paste that number back in. So now it's the same color. So here we get. They're nice transitions. You can also make them stop keyframes if you like. That would create a sudden shift in color. I kind of like the transitions. So that is a morph transition. Very smooth. All right, for the last transition, I'm going to use something called an infinite zoom. So I'm going to go down and copy my triangle and circle from the start. Copy and paste. And just drag it all the way up to the top. Just so it sits on the top of the morph. And I'll take it over I'll leave a 15 frame space between my morph and the new transition. So to get between these three, I'm just going to use the scale tool. Let me show you. So let me press S for scale. I'm going to go to the beginning, the I, and I'm going to press the stopwatch to start my layer. Start my keyframes, 0. And I'll do a quicker one this time to 5 frames, and I'll make another keyframe. So it just comes on like this, right? And then, as it comes out, press O for out. I'll press scale again. Now from 100, I'll draw back 5 frames. And that last keyframe is going to be something like 600. So now it becomes the background, right? So that means that this one has to do the same thing. Press S for scale, in for out, and 5 frames forward using my command arrow forward key, and I'll start it from 0. All right, now I'm going to drag this one all the way to the end here, and likewise that one all the way to the end. So now the background is here, this one comes on, and we will do the same thing. So scale it out, draw back 5 frames, and that last keyframe is going to be 600 again. Beautiful. Now here is this one, and I'll hit scale again, move it forward 5 frames, so 0 to 100, and at the end will be our one, two, three, four, 5 frames back, and it'll be 600 again. Maybe a little larger. 800. No, just so it covers. So here we have it. Pretty dynamic. Now let's make this even more dynamic. I'll select all my keyframes, press Function F9 on a Mac for the Bezier handles, right? So it gives it a little softer of a motion. And I'll just select the first ones here, and I'm going to go into my graph editor, and I'm going to make sure that I can see all of the motion here. I'm just going to pull those handles out. Now, here's what I can do. See how I can actually curve these up? Let's try that again. I'll have my soft in, soft out, my hold. Then, yeah, this one can go all the way, and then it'll kind of draw back, and then hit its mark. Which maybe slow down as it goes there. So let's see what that looks like. Let's go back out. Let's just zoom back out, and I'll go to here and preview that. So you can see the little bounce, right? It's really obvious now with the zoom. And that's just from that little overhang we did on the graph editor. You can see those little overhangs right here. See how it dips below the line and above the line? That means that you're getting this kind of anticipation and follow through on your actions. Let's replicate that on the other ones. So I'll just go here, do it again. So it kind of bounces in, holds, then gets a little smaller and slides out. And then let's do the same thing for these keyframes. Now I can just click on this Fit All Graphs to View. You can see everything in there. It's a really easy shortcut. So this then bounces in. Then a little anticipation on our last one and a slow out. So let's review that. Let's preview the whole thing. We'll zoom back out. I'll go to my Start keyframe, press B, my out point, and N, and I'll press spacebar to preview. Very nice. So I now have a zoom, an infinite zoom, where the object becomes the background. And I've got my handles on my graph editor adjusted so that there's a little bit of anticipation and follow through. So to review, let's look at all of our transitions. The first is our hard cut, the most obvious. Then we have the dissolve, where you have one dissolving to the next. The wipe, much more dynamic, more obvious. We have the match cut, which matches the movement. And we have the morph, which is very seamless. And now we have the infinite zoom. So to export that, make sure that your entire work area is covered, right, to your out point, and go up to File, Export, Add to Media Encoder Queue.